Let's call the Oceanside Planning Commission meeting for June 7th to order. If I could have everybody rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. City Planner, would you do roll call, and then I'll go through some housekeeping.
Good evening, Chairperson Rosales.
Present.
Chair Morrissey. Here. Commissioner Goodkind.
Present.
Commissioner Balma. Present. Commissioner Custer.
Here.
Commissioner Hayes.
Test. Here.
And Commissioner Rains, we believe, is going to try and join us via Zoom in the near future. But at this point, we'll mark him absent.
Great.
You do have, for the record, you have 6 commissioners, all in the chambers, and you do have a quorum tonight.
Great, thank you. To housekeeping. So, welcome to the Planning Commission meeting. This meeting will be conducted in accordance with Governor Newsom's Executive Order 2920 related to the COVID-19 virus. That order suspends several provisions of the Brown Act related to telephonic participation by the Planning Commission, staff members, and the public. Due to applicable public health orders, the City Council chambers are open to the public, but with limited capacity. Members of the public are encouraged to, I really should put my glasses on, listen and watch the meeting via Zoom, by computer, or by phone. The meeting can also be watched on KOCT, Cox Channel 19, AT&T Channel 99, or on live stream on KOCT's website, although that is a slight delay with that. To participate in person, members of the public who elect to attend in person are required to wear facial coverings in all city facilities, except when providing testimony, and are required to maintain appropriate social distances. The public will be required to wait outside the council chambers if capacity is reached. If required to wait outside the chambers, those wishing to testify will be allowed to enter the chambers only to provide testimony and then return to the outside chambers after testifying. We ask that you voluntarily wait outside the chambers until the item you are interested in is announced in order to better provide seating for each agenda item. And again, if you have a copy of the agenda, it'll have instructions on how to participate in this meeting via Zoom. Okay, we'll move on then to the agenda. Communications on matters not on the agenda. City Planner, any slips to speak to that item?
Mr. Chairman, we have no request to speak on non-agenda items.
Great, thank you. Approval of minutes from our last meeting, May 17th. All those not in favor say aye, otherwise we'll assume that we're good with the meeting minutes.
Abstention.
We have one extension.
I also will abstain.
Thank you. 2 abstentions, Commissioner Goodkind and Commissioner Balma. Other than that, it looks like we have approval. We don't have anything on the consent calendar nor transportation items. That takes us right into the public hearing items. Item 4 is our first item, which is a consideration of a regular coastal permit request to allow the demolition of an existing 224 square foot unpermitted room and construction of a 592 square foot single story addition with 170 square foot attached deck. The applicant is the applicant is Catherine Casanelli. The item number is called the Morris Addition. So we'll start with disclosures. Looking to my right, Commissioner Balma.
Staff report.
Vice Chair Morrissey. I read the staff report, did go by the site. Commissioner Hayes?
Read the staff report and attempted to go by the site. It's at a unique location.
Yeah, exactly. Commissioner Goodkind.
Same.
And Commissioner Custer?
Read the report, went by the site, and looked at it on Google Maps.
Great, thank you. Veronica Moronis is our staff presenter this evening. Good evening, Veronica.
Good evening, Chairperson Rosales, Planning Commissioners. My name is Veronica Moronis, and I'm here to present agenda item number 4 to you this evening, the Morris Edition. So the project site is located at 2115 South Tremont Street in South Oceanside Neighborhood Planning Area and within the appealable area of the coastal zone. The project site is a 7,200 square foot lot and has a general plan land use designation of low density residential and zoning designation of coastal single family. Directly adjacent to the south of the project site are 3 parcels owned by the Buena Vista Audubon Society. These 3 parcels, as outlined in green on this slide, are restricted for the purposes of the protection of coastal wetlands and watersheds due to a recorded agreement between the Audubon Society and the California Wildlife Conservation Board. A copy of said agreement is provided as attachment 3 to your staff report. Project site is surrounded by single-family development to the northwest and east, and the restricted vacant parcels to the south and beyond to the east. The applicant requests to construct a 592 square foot habitable addition and 174 square foot attached ground level deck to the existing approximately 1,200 square foot single-family residence. The proposed project includes demolishing and reconstructing an existing unpermitted sunroom, as well as the addition of a primary bedroom, bathroom, and exterior ground level deck. Since the project site is located within the appealable area of the coastal zone, final action by the Coastal Commission will be required subsequent to Planning Commission's decision. The existing residence is a 1,206 square foot single-story residence and includes a detached 2-car garage that would not be modified under the proposed project. The existing residence is situated in the center of the lot. The proposed addition would be located at the rear of the residence, as outlined in red on this slide, and would face the restricted parcels to the south. The existing and proposed floor plans are shown on this slide. The area shown in red is the proposed addition, and the red shaded area is the location of the unpermitted sunroom, which would be demolished and reconstructed under the proposed project. The proposed areas of addition would be single-story massing with a proposed maximum height of 11 feet 10 inches. The areas of addition are outlined in red on this slide for the for the east and west elevations. And on the south elevation, you'll notice that the proposed ground level deck is also outlined. The proposed project meets the required development standards of the R1 zone. Section 1040V of the city zoning ordinance provides a rear yard setback standard for lots which rear upon land to be permanently maintained as open space, and allows for those properties to, they are not required to have a rear yard setback. As discussed, the parcels located adjacent to the south of the project site are restricted for the purposes of protection of coastal wetlands and watersheds, as denoted in the recorded agreement under attachment 3. So the project site is not subject to a rear yard setback. The proposed project includes a 3-foot 8-inch rear yard setback to the area of addition, and the proposed ground level deck extends to the property line, rear property line. The proposed project would not result in impacts to the public beach access or on-street parking and is consistent with the city's LCP, local coastal program. And the proposed project would maintain the single-story massing of the existing home and includes a cohesive design consistent with the city's architectural design compatibility requirement. It should be noted that staff received no public comment on this project as of this meeting's time. So based on that, staff recommends the Planning Commission by motion confirm issuance of a categorical exemption for the purposes of CEQA and approve the regular coastal permit by adopting the attached resolution. And with that, staff is available for questions, and the project applicant and the property owner should be available via Zoom.
Great, thank you, Veronica. Any questions for staff? I see a hand, Commissioner Goodkind.
Thank you. Are we still, just for clarification, not using our?
That's a good question.
That's okay.
But go ahead, and then we'll follow up with your question.
This information in the staff report about the California Wildlife Conservation Board and that agreement, is there any relevance between that and this project? I couldn't quite understand why that was in there. Is it just background FYI information, or does it affect the approval in any way?
Sure, Commissioner Goodkind. So the project site would typically be subject to the standard rear yard setback of the R1 zone. And because it abuts upon property that is zoned, or not zoned, I should say, is permanently designated as open for purposes of open space, it's not required to have a rear yard setback. The reason that that's included as an attachment is because the city's zoning ordinance or zoning map currently designates those parcels as commercial and residential, but they are in fact deed restricted, which was discovered during the process of this permit.
Thank you for the clarification.
Any other questions for staff? I don't see any. You said the applicant was here or the representative. Do they want to do a presentation or just available for questions?
Available for questions.
Okay, and that's via Zoom. Any questions by the commissioners for the applicant?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Rains is online via Zoom now.
Great, welcome, Commissioner Rains. I don't see any questions for the applicant from the commissioners, so it is a public hearing. How about slips to speak on this item? City planner, any slips received?
Mr. Chairman, there was no public who requested to speak on this item. As Veronica noted, the applicant and their representative are available for questions. I don't see anyone. Well, you might ask if there's anyone in the public who didn't sign up to speak, but they can now.
Yeah, thank you. So if you're joining us on Zoom and you're a member of the public, this is a public hearing, and I believe they can raise their hand. Scott, or what method do they use to be able to, if they didn't submit a slip, to be able to say, I'd like to speak on this item? What's their protocol?
Sure. Chairman Rosales, if they'd like to speak and they haven't signed up, they can raise a hand. Typically, if allowed by the commission, we can allow it for them to speak if they raise hand on the Zoom here.
And I don't see any raised hands.
Right, there is none.
Great, thank you for confirming. Okay, then we will close the public. Go ahead, City Planner.
We need to have disclosures from Commissioner Rains.
Oh, thank you. Commissioner Rains, you joined us late. Can you give us your disclosures on this item? I see you, Commissioner Rains, and looks like...
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you. Go ahead and give us your disclosure.
Can you just repeat what the project was? I got kicked off. I need to get back on again.
Yes, it's consideration of a regular coastal permit to allow construction of an addition on a house and a deck at 2115 South Tremont Street. So it's an addition on a residential property.
And I have no disclosure other than the fact that I'm generally aware of the area and I've reviewed the emailed reports.
Great, thank you. So we have, let's check this off, disclosures, presentation, no presentation by the applicant, and no input from the public. So we'll bring it back for the commission, to the commissioners for a suggested approval or motion. Anybody? Yes, Commissioner Obama.
I'll go ahead if there's no other discussion. This project's been around for a while, at least the project in the foreground, because that was actually the boardwalk project for years. Remember that one, guys? I mean, I'm sure the staff remembers that one. But I guess over the years, the owner of that project gave up on it and gave it to the Audubon Society, which is a nice gesture. So this family entertains himself a nice location. So I would definitely approve and confirm issuance of a Class 1 category exemption for existing facilities pursuant to Section 15301 of the California Environmental Quality Act and approve the regular coastal permit RC 20-0012 and adopt Planning Commission Resolution number 2021-P21 with the findings herein.
I'll second that.
Great, thank you. We have a motion by Commissioner Balma and a second by Vice Chair Morrissey. Any further discussion? Don't see any, so we'll do an oral A or nay on this item, and then I'll do a housekeeping in terms of using our screens here. So starting with you, Commissioner Rains.
I vote A to approve the project.
Thank you. Commissioner Balma,
Yes.
Vice Chair Morrissey,
Yes.
Commissioner Hayes,
Yes.
Commissioner Goodkind,
Yay.
Commissioner Custer,
Yes.
and I too am a yes. City Planner?
We'll record that as 7 in favor, 0 against. The motion passes.
Thank you. So we had a question on housekeeping on using our screens to ask for recognition by the chair and/or the screen for showing our votes. We're still doing this method here that we just walk through, and that is more of an oral confirmation. And by the way, Commissioner Goodkind, if you did touch your screen, it shows that Susan Custer was speaking while you were speaking. So I'm guessing we're not going to go back to what we used to do a while back until we maybe get a little further along.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, the voting is keyed to the exact seats, and so I don't believe we have the ability to do that tonight. We can talk to our IT staff, but
Okay.
I think for tonight
Great.
we should probably just stay with the
Right.
verbal vote.
So commissioners, if you do want to speak, I'll look around and look for hands. We'll use that method tonight again. Okay, thank you for that. We will then go to the next item. Agenda item number 5 is consideration of a zoning text amendment to amend Articles 4, 11, 13, 16, and 30 of the Oceanside zoning ordinance. In particular, this is an emergency shelter zoning amendment, and the applicant is the city of Oceanside. I'll start with disclosures. I read the staff report. I believe that we did get, now I'm trying to remember if we got some emails. I'll say I don't recall that. And that's it. Commissioner Rains? Disclosure?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have any disclosures other than the fact that I've read staff reports.
Thank you. Commissioner Balma?
I read the staff report.
Vice Chair Morrissey?
Same.
Commissioner Hayes?
Same.
Commissioner Goodkind?
I read the staff report, and if there was public communication, I did not get it.
Thank you. And Commissioner Custer?
The staff report.
Great, thank you. Good evening, how are you?
Good evening. I'm doing well. Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Chairperson Rosales, Planning Commissioners. I'm Shannon Vitale with the Planning Division. I'm here tonight to discuss agenda item number 5, a series of zone amendments pertaining to emergency shelters and government offices. An emergency shelter is defined as housing with minimal supportive services for homeless individuals that is limited to an occupancy of 6 months or less. Currently, emergency shelters are allowed in certain zoning districts with a conditional use permit and are allowed in the limited industrial zone as a permitted use if they meet certain locational requirements. State housing law speaks to local government regulations regarding emergency shelters. Senate Bill 2 requires that local governments establish a zoning district where emergency shelters are permitted by right without separation requirements. In 2013, the city identified the IL district as the appropriate zoning district to allow these facilities by right. However, the city's current ordinance does not comply with state law because it includes separation requirements for these facilities. Assembly Bill 139 amended the parking requirements for emergency shelters. The current zoning ordinance must be revised to reflect the current parking standards as established in AB 139. The draft housing element identifies action items necessary to comply with state law. The action items listed in the housing element include revisions to the ordinance to comply with SB 2 and AB 139. In addition to the proposed amendments required by state law, staff received direction to explore opportunities for reducing barriers and streamlining the review process for emergency shelters located on city-owned property, as well as city government offices located in the public, semi-public zoning district. The proposed revisions to the city zoning ordinance will amend Articles 4, 11, 13, 16, and 30 of the city zoning ordinance to allow emergency shelters as a by right use on certain city-owned properties, modify the development operational standards for emergency shelters to comply with state law, and will allow City of Oceanside government offices by right in the public, semi-public zoning district. By right means that the project would not be subject to discretionary review, including the requirement for a conditional use permit and/or a development plan. All projects would still be subject to applicable development standards and environmental review pursuant to the California Environmental Quality Act. The proposed text amendments are only applicable outside the coastal zone and downtown district. The proposed revisions would expand the by right provision to apply to emergency shelters located on city-owned property in the commercial, industrial, and public semi-public zone. There is no by right provision for properties located in a residential zone. In order to qualify for the by right provision, the shelter must be located at least 300 feet from a residential district or a sensitive use, which includes childcare facilities, churches, parks, playgrounds, and schools. The distance would be measured from the building footprint of the shelter facility to the nearest property line of a residentially zoned district or the property line of a school, park, or playground, or to the nearest wall of a childcare facility or church. If the facility is within 300 feet, a conditional use permit would be required. In accordance with state law, staff is proposing amending the development standards for emergency shelters to align with the state guidelines regarding separation requirements and parking standards. Specifically, the following revisions are proposed. No facility shall be required to be sited more than 300 feet of another emergency shelter as measured from the property boundaries. Facilities located in the IL zone would not be subject to minimum separation requirements from a residentially zoned property. The CUP requirement for IL zone properties that are located adjacent to Oceanside Boulevard would be eliminated, and parking standards would be based on staffing level. The table on this slide details the proposed text changes to the city's zoning ordinance. Copies of each of these articles have been provided as attachments to the staff report. The proposed text is indicated by bold italic, and stricken text is language that's proposed to be removed from the ordinance. For easier reference, I did provide the relevant sections for each of the changes. Staff is proposing amending Article 4 to revise the definition of emergency shelter to include a provision for wraparound services and extending the length of stay to 6 months. Articles 11, 13, and 16 are revised to include a provision that allows emergency shelters by right on certain city-owned properties. And City of Oceanside government offices would be allowed by right on the public, semi-public zoning district. Please note that staff did further revise these articles to clarify that by right means no discretionary review, including a conditional use permit and/or development plan would be required. A memo explaining these changes was emailed last Thursday to all the commissioners, as well as posted on the website for public. Additionally, Article 13 is revised to remove the conditional use permit requirement for emergency shelters located on Oceanside Boulevard. Article 30 is revised to incorporate state law requirements and other operational standards as recommended by staff. These include changing the hours of operation to allow facilities to operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, extending the length of stay to 180 days, removing the maximum separation requirement, modifying parking standards to be based on staffing levels, including a provision for wraparound services that can include counseling, childcare, and other services provided to individuals staying within the shelter, and adding a provision for on-site storage for personal belongings. The proposed zone amendments would modify the development and operational standards to incorporate state guidelines, thus bringing the city's zoning ordinance into compliance with state housing law as it pertains to shelters. Since the IL zone has been designated as the appropriate by right zone, removing the CUP requirement would be necessary to ensure the ordinance complies with state law. Expanding the by right provision to apply to shelters located on city-owned property, the city is creating more flexibility and opportunities for these facilities to locate in the city and provide necessary services to the homeless population. Additionally, by allowing the city government offices located in the public, semi-public zone by right, the review of these facilities would be streamlined. Although these projects are proposed to be exempt from discretionary review, they are still subject to CEQA and would be required to apply for a building permit and meet all applicable development standards. The proposed amendments conform to the city's general plan in that they implement the draft housing plan action items related to emergency shelters and facilitate and streamline the construction of these facilities. The proposed amendments were brought forward to the Housing Commission on May 25th, and the Housing Commission did not have any comments or recommendations. We'll be bringing forward the zone amendment on June 16th to City Council. As of 4 o'clock today, we have not received any comments from staff. So I think the comments you received are regarding housing. No public comments on the emergency shelter. So with that, staff is recommending that the Planning Commission adopt resolution number 2021-P22, recommending City Council approval of the zone amendment. That concludes my presentation. I'm available for any questions.
Great, thank you, Shannon. I just had one question. So there was a bullet point a couple slides before you left us about this would comply with state law. Is it any more flexible than state law, or is it exactly consistent with state law?
Chair Rosales, Planning Commissioners, the proposed amendments are much more flexible. The state law only requires this for the IL district. The city is expanding the by right provision to city-owned properties in industrial, commercial, and public, semi-public zones.
Okay, so maybe a follow-up question. When staff went through its analysis of providing more flexibility than the state law, I imagine there was a lot of analysis in terms of where could these fit and different considerations. Maybe you can expand on sort of those discussions that took place.
Sure, Chairperson Rosales, Planning Commissioners. There was a team comprised of staff from Neighborhood Services, Planning, and the City Manager's Office that looked at possible options. And that's why in order to qualify for the by right provision on city-owned properties, there are certain location requirements. They need to be within 300 feet from a residential zone or sensitive use. Staff felt that was appropriate to ensure there wouldn't be any negative impacts on those surrounding uses, as well as the requirement to be on city-owned property. The city therefore has more oversight and management of the facilities.
Great, thank you. Any other questions for Commissioner Goodkind?
You can call him.
I'll start here and then I'll come over. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Following up on Chairman Rosales' question, so at the top of page 5 on the staff report, it says the following revisions are proposed to comply with state law. And I'm curious what part of the state law would apply directly to that strip on Oceanside Boulevard between I-5 and Hoover Street, as opposed to, for example, the downtown district, which I guess is still exempt, right?
Yes,
Okay.
Chair.
So what was the analysis behind that?
Commissioner Goodkind, state law requires that the city identify a zoning district, an entire zoning district. So those properties along Oceanside Boulevard has a zoning district of IL. Therefore, we cannot require any type of separation or discretionary review. The downtown district does not have any IL zone properties. Therefore, we do not need to allow them in the downtown area.
Okay, but that part of the state law was in effect, has been in effect a while, right? That's not a new state law.
That is Commissioner Goodkind, Planning Commissioners. That is part of SB 2, which has been in effect since 2007. However, I'm not sure why it was not in our ordinance prior, but we're correcting it now.
Okay, so we're kind of bringing things up to a higher standard because it's a more urgent problem now? Is that?
Commissioner Goodkind, I believe so, and the draft housing element did identify that as an action item that needed to be corrected.
Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you. Commissioner Balmer, you had your hand raised?
Yes, I did. Thank you. I have a question on some of the operational standards. You listed a bunch of different things like the parking and several other, I can't remember all of them right now. But nothing was mentioned about like drug and alcohol kind of restrictions on these facilities. Is that something that the city would want to entertain, or is that something that we can't because the state doesn't allow that, or what?
Commissioner Balma, as one of the conditions, any operator would be required to submit a management plan. I don't know the details of that management plan, but I imagine there would be some type of services, counseling services, maybe substance abuse services, perhaps testing, but I don't know the details of the operation.
Would that be included in the wraparound services kind of like word that was used? Wraparound services?
Wraparound services does include counseling as well as legal services, daycare, mental health care, so I believe so.
We'll also entertain the idea of drug and alcohol and try to circumvent that. I mean, I'm hoping. I guess that's The only other question I had was just maybe a housekeeping thing, because I know that the staff report had a lot of bold and stricken out kind of like items, and a lot of it had to do with the cannabis. So possibly that was just left over from the last staff report, but no big deal. That's just I'm just assuming that, correct?
So commissioners, that's correct. That other language was part of a zone amendment that just went to council last week, so it hasn't been solidified yet. That's why we have different text. That's correct.
Shannon, if I could ask a follow-up question to Commissioner Balma. So if conditional use permits are waived in these instances, but it sounds like we'd otherwise have them have operational plans, that'll just be a standard applied to everybody as they go in to set up an emergency shelter? So it's not really a condition of it, but it's more of a, here's what we're going to make sure you include as a shelter is set up.
So Chair Rosales, Planning Commissioners, in order to qualify for the by right provision, there is a condition that they must submit a management plan that's approved by the city. Otherwise, they would be subject to a conditional use permit.
Perfect, thank you.
And did I see, once these are set up, did I see a slide that they're 180 days?
Commissioner Morrissey, Vice Chair Commissioner. That is correct. We have extended the length of stay to 180 days, and that's consistent with state law.
And so what happens after 180 days?
I believe they would need to vacate, and then that's per year. I don't know all the details of that, but that's something that would probably be fleshed out with the operation and management plan of the operator.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Morrissey, do you have any other questions, or that's it? Okay. This is a public hearing. If commissioners have other questions, we can come back, but let's open it up to the public. City Planner, any slips, or Scott, any slips to speak on this item?
Yeah, Chairperson Rosales, we have no public speakers on this item.
Oh, okay.
I just have one comment, and that is, I think once we set up these shelters, I think it's important whoever's doing that work has the services that could be used to get folks into a better spot. And I guess that's where I would want to look to see what that plan is, and whatever it is, if it's writing resumes, if it's healthcare, if it's mental care, whatever. Because the whole idea is to get them to a better spot. If they're just down on their luck, just what help can the city give them to get to the next place?
Yeah, no, that's a really good comment. I know that by expanding the definition to include these wraparound services, hopefully we will be able to provide that type of support. But again, that would be on the operator side.
Commissioner Rains, I don't see your hand raised, but I'll ask you anyway. Any comments or questions?
No questions. My only comment would be to thank city staff. Great presentation.
Thank you. Okay, and you're looking for a motion on this, is that correct? Adopt a resolution, yes. We've concluded the public hearing then on this item, so let's bring it back to the commissioners for that consideration.
I'll make a motion if there's no more commentary. Okay.
Okay.
I will move to adopt Planning Commission Resolution Number 2021 P22, recommending City Council approval of zoning amendment ZA 21-00003 with findings of approval attached herein, and confirming issuance of an exemption from the California Environmental Quality Act Guidelines Section 15061B3 under the common sense exemption.
Great, thank you. We have a motion. Can I get a second?
I'll second.
And we have a second. Any further questions or comments? Don't see any, so let's vote. Commissioner Custer, why don't you lead us off?
Yes.
Commissioner Goodkind?
Yes.
Commissioner Hayes? Vice Chair Morrissey?
Yes.
Commissioner Obama?
Yes.
Commissioner Rains?
I vote to approve.
And I too am approving this motion. So, City Planner?
We'll record that as 7 in favor, 0 against, and I didn't get who made the second. I'm sorry.
Commissioner Obama?
Thank you.
Yes. Okay, we will then go to item 6, which is consideration of a general plan amendment to update the city's housing element for the 2021-20 through 2029 planning period, which is mandated by state law. Up there and turn it over. So the applicant on this is also the city of Oceanside, and it looks like we have Robert. It says Russ will be here, but Robert Weeklight. I see Russ in the background. Welcome, Russ. Between Russ and Robert, we'll go ahead and walk through the presentation. So welcome. You know what? Let's start with disclosures. Commissioner Custer?
The report and the emails.
Thank you. Commissioner Goodkind?
I read the report and received one email.
Commissioner Hayes?
I read the report and received the email and read it.
I have the same disclosure. Vice Chair Morsi?
Same.
And Commissioner Bama?
I also had the same.
And Commissioner Raines?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have the same disclosures as my fellow commissioners.
Great, thank you. Welcome again, Robert.
Thank you, Chair Gonzalez and Commissioners. Sorry for the confusion there on the presentation. I believe Russ is the overall project manager for the general plan update, and I'm the project manager for the housing element, so that may have been the mix-up there. But good evening. I'm Rob Demahowski with the Planning Division, here to present the housing element update. Per state law, the city is required to update the housing element every 8 years. The next cycle is effective from April 15th of 2021 to April 15th of 2029, and it must be adopted no later than August 15th of this year. The primary function of the housing element is to identify the housing needs of all Oceanside residents and establish goals and strategies for developing and preserving an adequate supply of housing for all income levels. The housing element places an emphasis on affordable housing opportunities for low-income households, as well as special needs groups. Housing law requires the housing element to consist of 5 components. The first is the housing needs assessment, which evaluates Oceanside's existing housing supply and analysis of the city's population, employment, and household characteristics to address topics such as low-income housing needs, overpayment, and overcrowding. Special needs groups identifies and addresses housing needs for special groups such as farm workers, large households, female-headed households, people experiencing homelessness, people with disabilities, and seniors. The housing sites inventory, one of the key components, identifies vacant and non-vacant sites throughout the city that is suitable for residential development to meet the city's housing needs. It must demonstrate that there is capacity for housing during the next cycle. The constraints analysis identifies and analyzes governmental and non-governmental constraints that potentially impact housing development. This includes an analysis of city codes and regulations, the permitting process, fees, development standards, and so on, and non-governmental constraints that may hinder housing production, such as land cost or construction costs. And finally, the housing action plan consists of 2 components, which contains the goals. The first contains the goals and policies, and the second contains the housing programs that describe how the city will implement and achieve its housing goals and policies during the 8-year housing cycle. Housing law requires that all regions in the state accommodate their fair share of housing, known as the Regional Housing Needs Assessment, RHNA for short. Oceanside received 5,443 units distributed into 4 income categories, and this is distributed throughout San Diego County, allocated by SANDAG in coordination with the California Department of Housing and Community Development in coordination with local jurisdictions. And the 4 categories are based on the San Diego County median income of $74,900. The city will receive credit for projects built, entitled, or under review since June 3rd, 2020, and this includes the projected number of ADUs that might be constructed over the next 8 years based on recent development trends through permitting. And it is anticipated the city will receive a total credit of 2,611 units, leaving a remaining RENA obligation of 2,832 units. The housing element must contain an inventory of land within the city that is suitable for residential development and has the capacity to accommodate the RENA. For this cycle, the city is focusing the housing on infill and redevelopment opportunities within the city's major transit and commercial corridors of Mission Avenue, Oceanside Boulevard, Vista Way, and Coast Highway. And this effort will rely on two regulatory documents, the Smart and Sustainable Corridor Specific Plan, which is being prepared as part of the General Plan Update Phase 2, and the recently adopted Coast Highway Incentive District, which is pending Coastal Commission certification. The Smart and Sustainable Corridor Specific Plan will seek to channel future housing growth and employment along the city's major commercial corridors and will identify ways to facilitate infill and redevelopment in these corridors with incentives and permit streamlining. The Coast Highway Incentive District seeks to transform Coast Highway corridor through high-quality urban and architectural design, allowing additional density, standalone residential projects, and expedited processing in exchange for public benefits. Both of these planning efforts will rely on properties that are generally zoned commercial and allow mixed-use opportunities. Sites were selected on a variety of factors, including unutilized land, the age of existing developments, focusing on existing commercial uses that are 40 years and older, or uses that are in disrepair. We've also considered contact with property owners who have expressed interest in residential development as mixed use. And sites were also evaluated based on access to transit, constraints such as slope and habitat, and access to water and sewer. Under the existing general plan land use, the city would only have a capacity for 1,441 new units, leaving a shortfall of 1,151 units. So the existing land use is based on the current land use, the number of units that would be allowed. So if there's residential land use designations, the total would be 1,441. So therefore, commercial properties within the Smart and Sustainable Corridor Specific Plan will need to be rezoned to increase the density allowance up to from 35 dwelling units an acre to 43 dwelling units an acre to provide the additional units to cover the shortfall, and which would ultimately provide a buffer of 3,460 units as a buffer above the minimum. And as shown on the maps, a majority of the sites will be located along Coast Highway and stretches of Mission, Oceanside Boulevard, Vista Way, closer to the I-5, and the blue hatching identifies the boundaries of the Smart and Sustainable Corridor Specific Plan. And the Coast Highway Incentive District is located between Seagaze Drive downtown, going down to South Oceanside at Moore Street. Public participation played an important role in the formation of and refinement of the city's housing goals and policies. The project team conducted outreach using the General Plan Update website and newsletters, planning office hours, focus group discussions with the housing, development, and real estate community, including affordable housing builders. We conducted bilingual online surveys and community workshops. There was a dedicated housing workshop, and we also hosted workshops as part of the General Plan Update, including the land use element, which has some efforts related to housing, so that kind of ties in with the outreach. And as a result of the outreach, some of the key themes that emerged, the highest concern overall from all the outreach is overcrowding and affordability, followed by addressing homelessness and ways to provide transitional housing and supportive services. The next is housing stock. We heard feedback that there's a need for a range of housing types, both small and large, to suit the needs of different size households. There's a need for quality housing, and connected to essential services and amenities, proximity to grocery stores, access to transit, and as well as recreational amenities. And overall, there was a strong support for mixed-use development along the transit corridors, which aligns with our efforts related to the corridor plan. And in general, there was a strong support to preserve existing neighborhoods, to limit or prohibit short-term rentals in new housing projects, particularly those that take advantage of density bonus to achieve additional unit counts. And finally, there was strong support for promoting the conservation of agriculture and focusing future residential development in infill areas rather than converting open space or agricultural land. The Housing Elements Housing Action Plan contains goals and policies that the city will implement to address a number of important housing-related issues during the 2021-2029 planning period. And the primary goal of the housing element is to ensure that decent, safe housing is available at a cost that is affordable to all current and future residents of this community. And there are 4 sub-goals. The first is to produce opportunities for decent and affordable housing for all citizens. Encourage the development of a variety of housing opportunities. Protect, encourage, and provide housing opportunities for persons of low and moderate income, and promote equal opportunity for all residents to reside in housing of their choice. And some of the policies associated with the goals, and I'm highlighting some of the key ones here. Policy 1, promote a high-quality urban environment with stable residential neighborhoods and healthy business districts. Encourage higher density housing development along transit corridors and smart growth areas. Explore a form of a cap on short-term rentals to preserve long-term housing stock. Encourage the disbursement of lower and moderate income housing opportunities throughout all areas of the city, and to encourage inclusionary housing to be built on or off-site for new housing projects rather than pay an in lieu fee. The second part of the housing action plan is the housing programs. And this section contains 20 programs that the city will implement to address various housing-related issues over the next cycle. Many of the programs are carried over from the previous cycle and have been added or amended to comply with state law. And housing programs are generally implemented by the housing division, in some cases the planning division, or in collaboration between the 2 departments. And I'll highlight some of the key changes or the new programs. The first, under Program 5, accessory dwelling units, the city will seek to utilize CDBG, Community Development Block Grant funding, to assist homeowners bring their unpermitted ADUs into compliance with building codes. And so there'll be a program to possibly a grace period, using fees to help them pay for plans to get those units up to code without penalty. Under Program 7, the adequate sites to accommodate RENA, there will be an action to rezone at least 33 acres for residential development with a density range of at least 35 to 43 dwelling units an acre to accommodate the shortfall of 1,151 units as previously mentioned. Under Program 8, by right approval for projects with 20% affordable units. So per Assembly Bill 1397, there's an action to amend the zoning ordinance to require by right approval of housing development that includes 20% of the units as affordable to lower income households applicable to sites that are identified in this cycle's housing sites inventory, and also representing reuse sites that were previously identified in the previous 4th or 5th cycle of the housing element. Under Program 11, there's Assembly Bill 101 that requires the zoning ordinance to be amended to allow low barrier navigation centers in areas zoned for mixed uses and non-residential zones that permit multifamily uses. And a low barrier navigation center is defined as a low barrier, temporary service-enriched shelter focused on helping homeless individuals and families to quickly obtain permanent housing. And these are unique in that they include best practices to reduce barriers to the entry of the facility, such as allowing partners, pets. There are going to be storage provided for personal items, as well as additional privacy. And finally, one of the most significant programs that it has been, is now required is Program 20 to implement the city's affirmatively furthering fair housing. And this is based off of Assembly Bill 686, which was introduced in 2017 to provide an obligation to affirmatively further fair housing into state law. And by definition, this means taking meaningful actions that overcome patterns of segregation and foster inclusive communities free from barriers that restrict access to opportunity for persons of color, persons with disabilities, and other protected classes. And the housing element must include an assessment of fair housing, which includes the following components: a summary of fair housing issues, an assessment of the city's fair housing enforcement and outreach capacity, an analysis of segregation patterns and disparities in access to opportunities, and assess contributing factors, and identification of fair housing goals and actions. And there are several action items within the program provided in the attachment. As required prior to the adoption of the housing element, the city submitted the draft of the housing element to HCD for a 60-day review on April 2nd of 2021. HCD provided us with preliminary feedback to the city on May 10th and arranged a phone call with us to discuss the comments. In response to HCD's feedback, the city responded to their comments, their preliminary feedback, and also provided revisions to the draft housing element. And on July 1st, a formal letter was provided by the city detailing additional information to bring the housing element into conformance with state law. Many of the items involve technical revisions and requests for additional information on certain statutory requirements. And due to the August 15th deadline to adopt the housing element, staff is recommending that the city council adopt the housing element in its current form on June 16th or prior to August 15th. And the project team will continue to work with HCD to resolve the remaining issues, and then would obtain a determination of full compliance with housing law. And once a letter of determination is issued, the staff would request city council approval of any revisions, the recommended revisions by HCD, and would request readoption of those specific components of the housing element. And as mentioned, the city council adoption will occur on June 16th, next week. The housing element provides goals, policies, and programs to facilitate the development of housing for all Oceanside residents of all income levels, including special needs groups. Aligning with the Smart and Sustainable Corridor Plan and the Coast Highway Incentive District, the housing element will focus future housing growth on infill and redevelopment within transit-served areas of the city, and will place an emphasis on themes such as quality of life, resilience, and sustainability. Incorporating recommended revisions by HCD will ensure that the housing element is in full compliance with state law, which benefits the city in many ways, including eligibility for state funding and allowing us to remain on an 8-year planning period cycle rather than a 4-year cycle if it's not adopted by August 15th. Based on this analysis, staff recommends that the Planning Commission by motion adopt resolution number 2021 P23 recommending City Council adoption of a negative declaration and approval of General Plan Amendment GPA 2102 to update the housing element for the 2021-2029 planning period with revisions as prescribed by HCD. This concludes my presentation, and we do have Veronica, our housing consultant, Veronica Tam, on the phone with us, available to answer any technical questions or other components of the housing element, as she is one of the co-authors of a majority of the element.
Great, thank you, Robert. Any questions for staff at this point, or the consultant? Commissioner Bama.
Yes, thank you. First off, the whole housing element draft form is amazing. You guys did a phenomenal job on this. It's just all the detail, all the research, all the technical stuff, finding all the different housing locations. It's just really remarkable how you guys have done this. I mean, really good job. So I have a couple of questions. One was on the smart growth planning initiatives. It's kind of lists all on the smart growth corridors, it lists all the different bus and transit stations. And for a long time, the city of Oceanside was trying to pull off OC number 8, which is a San Luis Rey transit stop. And now I noticed on this last draft, it wasn't pulled off, and there's no notes on the side that says that City of Oceanside is going to try to pull that out. Is this a change in direction for that? Or do you know what I'm referring to? Okay.
Yes, Commissioner Balma. I may have to get back to you on that specifics, or I believe Mr. Cunningham may have a better overview of that component.
That was something that I know the city was kind of not wanting to push density out in that part of town, and that was kind of an incentive to have that transit station listed as like a priority, I guess, or an opportunity area is what it states. The other question I have, which
Commissioner
is like,
Balma?
sorry.
Pardon me.
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I think I can answer your question.
okay.
As part of this Sustainable Corridors Plan, we reviewed all the different corridors, and we felt that the site number 8 out on North River Road wasn't within a transit corridor or an appropriate site. So as part of the corridors grant that we applied for, we removed that. It's not part of the grant. It's not part of the corridor plan.
Okay. All right, thanks. The other question I had was, I note on the land inventory summary, which is excellent, again, which shows we have a surplus of housing units. But I was just wondering, and with all of the stuff that was listed and the referring to entitled and under review, nothing was stated about the North River Farms project, which is almost 600 units. Is that something because it's in a different category? Maybe it's still kind of hanging there, I wonder where that one went, I guess, was one of my questions. And the other question is that in South Morro Hills, by right, there's an additional 1,000 units that can be built out there. So those don't count for any kind of housing for the future? I mean, or do we just don't want to talk about it? Or that's just something that's zoned out there? It's 1 unit per 2.5 acres, which should allow another 1,000 houses, even though many people don't want to recognize that. And hopefully we can cluster that. But anyway, so that's the 2 questions.
Well, thank you, Commissioner Balma, for your first question regarding the North River Farms project. When the analysis was conducted, the referendum was in effect, and that project was not viewed as an entitled project. Therefore, it was not counted as part of, as of June 30th, the cutoff. It wasn't viewed as entitled. So we looked at projects between June 30th of 2020 to our cutoff was about January of 2021. So it's just a shot in time. We could continue to add units, but for the purposes of this housing element, we focused on those, so it did not include that project. As far as the housing units for South Morro Hills, we did not include the Morro Hills or any agriculturally zoned properties in this housing sites inventory. Our focus was on the corridors, and there wasn't a need to include projected growth in those areas. Therefore, there's no need to account for housing, even though it's allowed by the zoning to build 1 house on each of those parcels.
Totally understand. Thank you.
If I could elaborate a little bit, there are properties out in the city that are zoned residential that aren't in our sites inventory. Again, we have to make a certain capacity, and then we need a buffer on top of that. And then after that, there's just other residential zone properties. Right. We tried to focus the growth, and the rezonings are only going to occur in the corridors. So That's why South Moore Hills and North River Farms are not included, even though they have a residential capacity.
Thank you. Thanks for that excellent answer. I understand.
Good questions and very thorough report, Robert. Appreciate it. Any other questions for staff? Go ahead.
Hi, Robert. How are two categories of housing accounted for in the inventory? Ghost homes, so houses that are sitting empty, maybe second homes for people, but they're not occupied most of the time, and short-term vacation rentals.
Commissioner Goodkind, I did review the comment regarding ghost homes, and I may defer that question to Veronica Tam to see if she has if there's a category on a ghost home, which would be a vacant home. So basically a home that is not owner occupied nor leased or rented by anyone.
Right, so a house that's sitting there but not providing housing, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
As well as short-term rentals that are used for short-term purposes.
How we're accounting for those, for short-term vacation rentals as well in the inventory.
Robert, do you want to deflect that to Veronica?
Yes, I believe
Okay.
Veronica.
Hi, good evening, Veronica. How are you?
Good, thank you. When it comes to analyzing the housing market, certainly we can talk about the impact of ghost homes and also short-term rentals and how they impact the local housing market. For the purpose of the regional housing needs allocation, unfortunately, they don't get any kind of credit for it because the RENA is for new units only. It doesn't allow you to fulfill your RENA, regional housing needs allocation, with existing units.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that explanation. Commissioner Raines, any questions or comments for staff?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have two questions. Overall, very good presentation by the staff. As far as the special group that was on the first or second slide, they talked about farm workers and homeless people. I was curious to know how come city staff didn't, or if they even had the option to put our veterans and military members as a part of the special group.
Thank you, Commissioner Raines. I may also defer that question to Veronica on how veterans are how they would be classified if that would fall under.
Go ahead, Veronica.
Sure. By state law, the special needs groups are the ones that we have outlined. Certainly, if the city would like to add specific policies relating to housing for the veterans or military personnel, we could but I think in general, definitely veterans and military personnel, they would be considered as typically lower income. And therefore, they'll be eligible for affordable housing for lower income in general. So the city doesn't have any specific programs or policies on those groups. However, it's entirely the city's decision if you want to do that.
I would think just based on our proximity to Camp Pendleton, might be a good idea to start thinking about that, to include that type of language. And then my second question had to do with, during the presentation, you guys talked about public comment, and it was mentioned short-term rental restrictions. Were there any short-term rental restrictions as a part of this, or did I just misunderstand that?
Commissioner Raines, as part of this project, there are no proposals for any restrictions on short-term rentals. The city's existing short-term rental ordinance regulates them, and this policy is to simply evaluate short-term rentals in the future and their potential impact on housing stock to meet the RENA.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you.
And if I could follow up on that, policy 1.7 on page 8 of your staff report speaks to the city exploring some form of a cap on short-term rentals to preserve long-term housing housing stock. So as Veronica said, we can't take these out of our housing inventory, well, not the sites inventory. We can't exclude them as in terms of our number of units in our city, but we can start exploring programs to limit short-term rentals so that we could conceivably have more long-term housing stock.
And if you could expand on that, City Planner, so would that exercise be within the context of the next 8 years as we get to the 8 years? Or if I remember the short-term rental policy, we were going to get, I think, an annual kind of update on how that policy was going. So would the exercise of looking at all that maybe happen in that annual review, or?
Yeah, I think it's somewhat organic, and it would be ultimately up to the city council. But you mentioned and I think it's a biannual report that we provide to the city council on our number of short-term rentals. And that might be information that the council believes is a good basis to start exploring this. So it's somewhat loosely worded, but it does address the concerns that we've heard from the community during the housing element update, but also during our short-term rental permit process that you were the chair on that.
I recall that was a very core issue. Yeah. So, okay, very good. Again, this is a public hearing, and so I'll turn to staff, ask if we have any slips, if the public would like to weigh in on any comments or questions.
Chairperson Rosales, we do have 2 public speakers. First speaker being Diane Nygaard, and the second speaker will be Colleen Balch. Diane, you are free to speak.
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. Diane Nygaard, representing Preserve Calavera. There's certainly lots right about this housing element update, and we support it. It builds on years of work looking at our transportation corridors and smart growth sites. It's going to help revitalize those commercial areas. It grows where people will have transportation choices. It protects our neighborhoods from upzoning, reduces greenhouse gases and VMT, and is consistent with the regional transportation plan. So there's a lot that's good about it, but we still have 3 areas of concern. The first is funding for low and very low income housing, particularly the homeless. Our percent affordability housing requirements, the in lieu fees are key to that and certainly require further consideration. Secondly, short-term vacation rentals. We've touched on that already. We need to have some real limitations on that. It takes housing out of the housing market and converts them to rental units. There's plans to address that. It needs to be done sooner rather than later to put some real caps on that and protect that as housing units. And third, how we protect our natural lands and agricultural lands. I call your attention to policy 1.6 and quote, it encourages high-density housing development along transportation corridors and smart growth areas in order to encourage preservation of natural resources and agricultural lands, unquote. We need to make those words actually mean something instead of just broad policy. We haven't yet seen the conservation element, so we have no idea what's being done to protect our natural resources. And there are still lots of concerns about the details of the Morrill Hills Pacific Plan. If we do not address that protection of natural land and agricultural land, we really jeopardize this entire plan because developers will build where it's easiest for them to build, and open land and agricultural land is the easiest place to build. I also call your attention to the letter from HCD, pages 5 and 6, where they chided the city for their public input process. And they reminded the city that they need to have a robust process moving forward. In the staff report, they identified several issues that were raised by the community in comments. But frankly, I'm hard pressed to see one change made to this draft report in response to public comment. And those things matter. In fact, Wednesday night, the city is holding a notice of prep meeting on the entire general plan the corridors plan, Morro Hills Pacific plan, the whole thing, notice of prep. You cannot do environmental review on these plans until you have finalized the plans. And we were promised much more opportunity for community input. So we certainly support approval of this, but ask you to address these concerns and to make sure that there's a robust community input process, a meaningful process moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. Colleen? Go ahead.
Good evening, commissioners. I want to chime in that I agree with most of what Diane said. I want to add a couple things. I'm not opposed to this item that you're discussing tonight, but remember, right now, we need to consider we have no water. We have no electricity being generated except for what is existing. And currently they want to take away natural gas, which is also a way that we produce electricity. I agree with the fact that if we're building in the corridors, density bonuses being used, the land should be deed restricted from short-term rentals in perpetuity because it just takes away from the housing stock. In reassessing single-family neighborhoods, I hope you do stay true to your comment that you're going to protect them because by and large, they are where people want to live. And the other thing is I also would like to know why, same thing as Commissioner Raines, why are our veterans not considered first? And regardless of what the state says, we're a community of veterans. We have a base right next door. Our veterans should be first before anybody else. And thank you for listening tonight.
Thank you, Colleen. Is that it for speakers, Scott?
Commissioner Rosales, we have one more speaker. Joan Bachman, looks like she raised her hand to speak. Are we okay to allow her to speak?
Oh, of course.
Okay.
Good evening, Joan. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I thought I put in the request. I can't emphasize enough how important the smart and sustainable corridors part of the housing element is. City after city, everywhere, all over the world, just merely takes the older parts of the city and gentrifies it in ways that make it pretty unlivable and really don't result in a better system. And in our case, absolutely would not result in more affordable housing. So the smart and sustainable corridors really solves the last mile problem, solves the problem of density being where density needs to be. We have every income level in multifamily units. So we have $1 million condos, we have low-income housing, we have assisted housing with Housing Works, things like that. So it really is a great solution. And not only that, it's built on a lot of research. And I can't emphasize that enough either. The research started with the Oceanside Boulevard plan, the Coast Highway plan, or originally the Oceanside Boulevard plan, where we studied other cities and found the pattern of avenues and nodes going through and traveling around the world. I have seen that in Barcelona. That's why Barcelona is always called out as an example. I've seen it in LA. I've seen it in Singapore. I've seen it all over the world, literally. And in our backyard. And I've seen where it's failed. El Cajon Boulevard is an absolute failure. It's a strip mall. Coast Highway is a strip mall. So by putting housing on the ground in the avenues and having the nodes be where the mixed use is, really solves those problems. And we can grow without impacting any neighborhoods as far as density. Of course, single family homes are going to be horrifically expensive. They are in La Jolla. But somehow in Oceanside, we can't have that. I don't understand that. I think it's a better process to keep the neighborhoods as the neighborhoods are. Currently, there's no rezoning of neighborhoods. That is critical. And putting all the density on our major corridors. I personally found 50 different spots where we could put density for this. So it's not a problem. We know lack of land. We don't need Morrow Hills, and we can meet our goals. So I think that's fantastic. Oceanside is leading the way. And of course, I do agree with the other speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Joan. That concludes public input.
Yes, that's all the speakers.
Great, thank you. All right, we'll bring it back to the commission. You heard some comments, or if you have a follow-up comment or question for staff, go ahead, Commissioner Ball.
I have another question for staff. On the constraints to development section in our staff report, in the section it talks about under the water and sewer priorities, it basically says that affordable housing will have a priority for water and sewer. Can you expand on what that means by priority, like over other projects, over farming? What's the priority mean?
Commissioner Balma, I believe it would refer to projects having priority to, so if there was a CIP project or installing infrastructure that would benefit a site identified in the housing sites inventory to accommodate a project that would, to the benefit of lower affordable housing, would be preferred. And Veronica may be able to elaborate on this topic as well, if I didn't cover the full.
Yeah. That is SB 1087. That's been in place since, I think, 2012 or 2013. It's just requirements that if you are the local jurisdiction is the water and sewer provider, then you have to have a policy to prioritize the provision of water or sewer allocation to affordable housing projects if an allocation system is in place. So, for example, if you have an extreme drought and you have to come into a kind of rationing kind of system, then an affordable housing project needs to receive priority consideration. That's state law. If you're not the service provider, then the water and sewer service providers will need to be made aware of this requirement. And the state law says that upon adoption of the housing element, that within 30 days, those water and sewer service providers should be provided a copy of the housing element. And that's a state requirement that's been in place since, I think, 2012 or 2013.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yes, Commissioner Hayes, go ahead.
I'm just curious about what's outstanding with respect to the HCD's letter. And I think one of the things I saw was a lack of public outreach prior to sending the submittal to HCD. So if we go and approve this tonight and then City Council approves it June 16th, how is the HCD going to view that? Just concerned a little bit.
Commissioner Hayes, I believe the reference comment is in regards to when the draft housing element was released for public review, and we released the draft concurrently for public review as well as HCD review, and they generally recommend releasing the draft to the public as soon as possible. Based on our timeline, we were working hard to get the draft ready for review, and we were unable to release it for public review prior to releasing it to HCD. We did have conversations with our reviewers at HCD, and they recommend that we make the draft available throughout the hearing process, and our going forward, our goal is to if the City Council adopts the housing element, we would make the revisions to the document and then release that for public review so that they can review and comment on the draft and before we submit for a final HCD compliance review. So I believe their focus is more on accessibility of review of the draft and not general outreach prior to drafting the housing element.
And Mr. Chairman, if I could elaborate. First of all, Rob mentioned a lot of the public input that went into prior to the draft. So it's not like this was done in a vacuum. Also, as of April 15th, we were supposed to have adopted our housing element. And they give us a 120-day grace period. And so it's absolute by August 15th. So we're under somewhat of a time constraint. And then given that the council doesn't have meetings in July, we wanted to get it to council in June with the idea that maybe they want revisions, then we can come back in August. So it was somewhat constrained by the timeline. But as Rob said, if we get it adopted and then we have to revise it, we will have more time then. We won't be under this really tight constraint to have it adopted by August 15th. So we should have an ability to hold more workshops or et cetera to get public review of those revisions. We're committed to doing that.
Just one quick follow-up. Has this plan of how we're going to proceed been discussed with HCD staff then, and they would be supportive of us doing it this way or not?
Mr. Hayes, we'll be having further discussions with HCD moving forward on the proper outreach moving forward. And I believe the goal is to have any revisions that we making those accessible to the public so that they can review those draft components and provide feedback that can be relayed to HCD as they conduct their review to see how we're addressing public comment and as well as just general feedback to the revisions.
One more thing, just I really agree with the way that you've approached this, and I've seen Veronica Tam speak in a number of different other forums, and I'm glad we have her on board. I think this is a great way to move forward with meeting our RENA allocation. So thank you.
If I could clarify one thing. The state says we have to have a housing element adopted by August 15th. Then we have the ability to go and work with HCD. It doesn't have to be certified or in compliance, I think is the phrase they use. We have the ability to then work with them to bring it into compliance after August 15th. So we do have a little bit of leeway after August 15th.
If I may interrupt, I want to, it gets me very nervous. It's August 12th. Because if you add 120 days to April 15, it's actually August 12th.
Thank you.
So I want to make sure that we don't miss that just because we tend to just add 3 months to 4 months to April. But Jeff, you're absolutely correct. State law says you must adopt the housing element within 120 days of the statutory deadline. Certification is something that is completely, not contingent on that deadline. And the other thing that I want to emphasize is that the affirmatively furthering fair housing requirement is brand new and it's very, very extensive. And the state actually just released the guidance on how to conduct that analysis on April 27th, past the statutory deadline of the San Diego region. And so we were scrambling to actually put something together, and we're working on it right now. Now that the guidance actually came out, we're revising that section, and we'll be resubmitting that to the state along with the additional revisions that they're requesting.
Thank you, Veronica, for that additional information. Commissioner Goodkind?
Yeah, just following up. Is there a plan, or what is the plan for more public outreach and participation post August 12th?
Commissioner Goodkind, our goal is to have accessibility to the revised draft housing element. The outreach would focus on the work that's been done already and not soliciting necessarily new input on what components would go into the housing element, but seeking input on the existing draft as viewed this evening, as well as the revisions that we make in order to bring the housing element into compliance with state housing law.
So is there a plan for a series of workshops, or what does that look like in practice?
At this time, I don't have a precise answer on the type of outreach we would conduct, but definitely we have an extensive interested parties list as part of the general plan update. I believe we have over 1,200 subscribers to that, and we also have a project website and so on. So we will explore options on how to make the document accessible to the public moving forward, and we can report back our ideas on that.
Thank you, Robert. I just want to add my voice to the other voices regarding how important it is to have more public input and a process for that. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Morrissey.
Yes, so I think if there's planning commission consensus, does it make sense that we could add vets to the special groups and the housing element?
Commissioner Morrissey, Vice Chair, that is correct, that special groups and the city can expand on identifying special groups specific to the city.
I think that can be picked up in a motion, that recommendation get forward to the city council for consideration.
Thank you.
Commissioner Raines, anything else to add?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Great. I think we're probably ready then for somebody to make a motion on the requested action. And then per Vice Chair Morrissey's suggestion, we could add some language or a recommendation to City Council. You want to go ahead and take a crack at it?
So I'd like to make a motion to adopt the Planning Commission Resolution Number 2021-P23, recommending City Council adoption of a negative declaration and approval of General Plan Amendment GPA A21-2 to update the housing element for the 2021 to 2029 planning period with revisions as prescribed by the California Department of HCD, and with the addition that we would add the veterans groups to special groups to the housing element.
Can we make it, Commissioner, veterans and active duty military?
Sure.
Very good. City Planner, is that clear enough as a motion?
I believe so, and I'm just want to get the logistics down. We can revise the resolution, and Tom, you could come in on Friday and sign it with that revision?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor with some additional caveats that are included, and I think City Planner addressed that they've got what we want to include on that in that resolution. So I'll look for a second on that motion.
I'll second.
We have a second from Commissioner Goodkind. Any further discussion? Don't see any, so let's go around the room. So Commissioner Raines, you started that idea to add that additional group, so I'll let you weigh in first with a yes or no.
Sure, I vote to approve the plan, and as a veteran myself, I thank my fellow commissioners for the amended language.
Thank you. Commissioner Balma.
Yes.
Vice Chair Morrissey.
Yes.
Commissioner Hayes.
Yes.
And Commissioner Custer.
Yes.
I think it's all a great idea. And Robert and the consultant Veronica, I appreciate all the work that you put into this, and the rest of the staff as well. It's a good process and well thought out. I too am a yes on my vote. So City Planner.
For the record, we'll record that as 7 in favor, 0 against, recommending council adoption or approval with the revisions as noted.
Great, thank you. That brings us to, on the agenda, appeal of city planners determination. Don't have anything listed. Discussion items also don't have anything listed. So we'll go to city planner and commissioner reports. I really don't have anything this evening to add to the discussion, so I'll look to my right. Vice Chair Morrissey?
No report?
Commissioner Goodkind?
No report, thank you.
Commissioner Obama?
I have no report, but I have a question to staff. I noticed that wonderful-looking bike storage that's out front of the building. Is that being used at all? That's just a comment you can maybe answer later, or?
Commissioner Baum, I'm not sure the extent of how often it's being used, but we can get back to you. It is fairly new. Some of us actually just bring our bikes into our offices, so it's not an exact indication of the amount of people using bikes to get to work.
Commissioner Custer?
No report.
Commissioner Hayes?
No report.
And Commissioner Rains?
No report. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. All right, city planner, any reports or updates?
Mr. Chairman, your next meetings on July 21, I believe we are still on schedule. Russ can correct me if I'm wrong, to bring the circulation amendment to this body. This would remove the Melrose extension, which is a portion of Melrose. It would remove the portion by Wahome and not on the north side of the river. That would remain in the circulation element. There's also 4 condos at 1930 Broadway. On July 12th, your next meeting after that is St. Malo variance, and we are recommending denial on this one, which is a little unusual, so that's why I mentioned it. And then 1915 South Tremont, there's 5 apartments. And I believe that's it. There is a scoping meeting on June 9th for the general plan update. The scoping meeting is intended to identify items or issues that could have potentially significant impact as part of CEQA. It's not intended to be a thumbs up or thumbs down or to weigh in on the merits of a project. So that involves our general plan update. And I think that's it.
Thank you. Thank everybody for their participation and input this evening, and we stand adjourned.